The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. He spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva and smeared the clay on his eyes and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back able to see. His neighbors and those who had seen him earlier as a beggar said, "Isn't this the one who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is." But others said, "No, he just looks like him." He said, "I am." They brought the one who was once blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus had made clay and opened his eyes on a Sabbath. So then the Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see. He said to them, "He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and now I can see." So some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a sinful man do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said to the blind man again, "What do you have to say about him, since he opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." They answered and said to him, "You were born totally in sin, and you are trying to teach us?" Then they threw him out. When Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, he found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered and said, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "I do believe, Lord," and he worshipped him. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Kids, come here. Come up here, kids. Because we're going to answer that question that we asked at the beginning of Mass. So what was the question you had to ask people around you? That's not the whole question. The whole question is, how on earth did you get so good looking? And the answer is, you didn't. You didn't get good looking on earth. You got good looking in heaven. Yes, earth helped, your mom and dad helped, but you got so good looking in heaven. And our readings today invite us to look at things the way God does. In the first reading, God said, Samuel said, where is it? "Not as man sees does God see, because man sees the appearance, but the Lord looks into the heart." And the second reading said, "You are children of light because of God." The first reading also said that the Spirit came upon David, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God. Pretty cool, huh? Guess what? That same Spirit came upon you when you were baptized. You got God's Spirit inside of you. You're also made in God's image and likeness, and that's how you got so good looking, because you're made to be like God. Now, I know that sometimes we judge each other, right? And sometimes there might be a kid at school, you say, that kid's not so good looking, that kid doesn't dress as cool as everybody else, that one is strong and handsome, that one's pretty, and that one, but we judge people, we say, this one's better, this one's worse. God just looks at you and says, I love you so much, and you are so good looking because you're made like me. Now, when's your birthday? May 1st. What year? How old are you? 8. So 8 years ago, let's see, 2016, right? So do you know that on that day, I bet you there's a lot of excitement in your family that you were born, right? Guess what? On that day, there was a whole bunch of excitement in heaven. You know why? Because of you. Because you were born. And the same thing on all of your birthdays. When you were born, there was so much excitement in heaven because another person made in God's image and likeness had just begun their journey in life, showing the world how glorious God is through you because of your life. Isn't that an amazing thing? Yeah. And so that means no matter what, you are very good looking. You're made in God's image and likeness, and it didn't happen on earth, it happened in heaven. And you have to now spend the rest of your life letting the world see your light. Can you do that? Tell you what, here's what I want to ask you to do. I want you to run to your parents or whatever adult you're with and give them a big kiss and tell them, thank you for cooperating with God and making me so good looking. Go ahead, go ahead. Ooh. Okay, now I want to talk to the adults. I'm going to ask you a question. I guarantee you're probably going to get it wrong. Okay, I got my smartphone here. What are those things on the phone? Wrong, I knew it. Exactly, they're icons. They're not apps, they open up into apps. They're icons. Think about it, how many people here have a PC, not a Mac? Your computer at home is not an Apple computer. We use Windows. That's the system, right? The windows are icons. You click on a window, it opens up a whole program. You can do it with the internet, you can do it with other work you've been working on, all sorts of stuff, right? And on the phone, the same thing. But the icon is the window that opens it up. Long before there were computers and smartphones, there were icons. They used it in religion. As a matter of fact, turn around, look at the back corners of the church. We got 3 in each back corner. Those pictures back there, they look like icons, but they're not real icons. Okay, that's the style. Okay, but a real icon. See, those were made probably by a computer, or at least copied and printed through a computer. A real icon is painted by hand, and there's special rules about how you do it. Special paint, and you're supposed to be praying while you're doing it. And in the Eastern Church, in the Greek Orthodox Church, and the other Eastern Christian churches, they use them in church, and there's usually a candle right in front of them. And then what they do is they're supposed to raise us up into God's presence. Icons are windows into God's presence. Okay? Now, the thing about today's celebration is we're called to see the world the way God does. We're also called to allow ourselves to be seen the way God does. But let's look at the way we look at things, and then we'll look at the way God does. We do make a lot of judgments. Kids, you get marks on your tests and on your papers, you get all sorts of corrections and stuff like that, and we're judged. Oh, I missed that one. Oh, I did that. When it's gym class and they're picking sides, you get judged who's the most athletic and stuff like that. We get judged about everything. We judge people on their looks, and sometimes it can be, it can cause challenges. I mean, like, some of the adults might have been saying, when I'm bringing up the kids, oh, he's going to bring up the kids again, that's such a distraction. Maybe. I don't know. They might have been thinking that. Some kids look at some of the adults, and they might say, would you speed it up with your cane? Could you move a little faster? You see, think about this. With kids, we say, or with young people, we say, you're good looking. With old people, we say, you're looking good. All right? There's a big difference, okay? But so, what happens is, when we look at each other and we do make judgments, and if we take it too far, it can cause all sorts of problems. If the judgment goes by skin color, texture of hair, the shape of the eyes, where you're from, and stuff like that, those can cause all sorts of problems, not just in our world, but in our heart. Because our heart is supposed to see the way God does. In the first reading, Samuel says, not as people see, but as God sees. God sees into the heart. People judge by appearance. So we're called to look at one another and look at ourselves the way God does. So what happened in the first reading? Samuel is going to choose the king of his people. And he goes to Jesse, and who does he bring first? The oldest one. Here he is. Nope. Okay, how about this one? Nope. How about this one? Nope. All the way down to he's like, I don't have any more sons. Oh, wait a second. There's the little kid. He's not taking care of the sheep because that's all he's capable of doing. Let's bring him. All right. That's the one, because God sees from a different point of view. God says, this is my beloved. This one is the one that I want. Totally different perspective. Jump to the gospel. What happens? Actually, we heard a short version of the gospel. And in the longer version, at the very beginning, the disciples say to Jesus, why is this man blind? Is it his sins or his parents' sins? And Jesus says, it's nobody's sins. He was born blind so that God's glory could shine through him. Last night at the 5 o'clock Mass, we had sitting up here our friend George Harkin, who's deaf. You say, why is he deaf? Why is he handicapped? He's not, he's different. But you know why? So that God's glory can shine through him. He has changed our parish, changed the way we pray with our entire being when we use sign language in our prayers. He's called us to grow, to see like God, and to respond like God. Wow. That's not handicapped. That's a superpower, I think, you know? So, this blind guy, he glorifies God. Not because of his sins, because of the healing. And we're called to see that way and to be that way. But think about this. An icon is a window into God's presence. Each one of us, made in God's image and likeness, called to reflect God's image and likeness, is an icon. Each one of us is called to bring others into God's presence. Do we do it? Well, I think we got to work on it a little bit. You see, again, we look and judge by appearance and all sorts of stuff like that. God just looks and says, I love you. That's it. He looks with love at each one of us. But sometimes we have trouble looking at ourselves that way, and so we have trouble looking at others that way. I remember when I was working in the high school, there was this kid in 8th grade. He was getting into all sorts of trouble for making fun of other kids. Brought him into my office, and I said, I'm not the one who gets in trouble, I just want to talk to you about it. Go to the principal for that stuff. I said, I have a feeling this is what's going on. You see, you're in 8th grade, you're starting to grow up, your body is changing, and there's different things that happen, and you're not too sure what's going on. And so what you're doing is, you point out somebody else's flaw, so that nobody is looking at yours. He said, how did you know? Because I was your age once. But we do that, you know? But think about this. There was this monastery that had only 5 monks left. It was dying. They were old. It was kind of, I don't know, they just, nothing was happening, no new vocations and stuff. But there was a rabbi who lived nearby. And the head of the monastery went and talked to the rabbi. He's like, we're dying, we got to do something. We got to get this place going. And the rabbi says, I don't know. He said, you have no answers? He says, no, I have no answers, but I do want to tell you one thing. One of you is the Messiah. He went back and told the other 4 guys. And they started thinking to themselves, wait a second. If you might be the Messiah, I better be nicer to you. And if I might be the Messiah, I better start acting like a Messiah and being nice. And they started, in just the fact, not knowing who it was, they started changing the way they acted. They started living as if they were in God's presence. And what happened was, this monastery had beautiful grounds, and people would go there just for quiet walks and stuff like that. But then they started seeing these people living in joy and in love and in service. And they said, I want some of that. And all of a sudden, they started getting vocations. People were joining the community, and it came back to life. All because they looked at one another and themselves as a sign of the presence of God. Imagine what could happen if each one of us, in just this room, were to choose, from this moment on, I am going to live as an icon. I'm going to live as a window into the sacred. And I'm going to look at everybody else who I meet as if they are a window into the sacred. I'm going to peek at heaven through them. Imagine what would happen in our homes. Imagine what would happen at work. Imagine what would happen even on the LIE. Right? So think about it. We all have people in our lives who drive us crazy. Many of us have them right in our family. But those people who drive us crazy are made in God's image and likeness too. And so, if we look through the eyes of God, if we open the eyes of our hearts, and we see the glory of God first in ourselves, and then in everyone else, boy, this world would be a much, much better place. So going back to the question we asked in the beginning, how on earth did you get so good looking? You didn't. It happened in heaven. And you can let people see heaven just by your life.